Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young, as well as the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch. I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, and it's been a busy week. Of course, last Friday we talked about the latest announcement from the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation and what they would be covering in 2026. Ryan, you had a chance to catch up with APAS and SARM to get their reaction to that announcement.
Yeah, they were both at the news conference in Melville at the head office, and they were asked to give a comment or two about the details announced in the 2026 program. And it was kind of a general comments from both Bill Huber and Bill Perbilski. Both said that they're very grateful that the program is continuing to get federal and provincial funding under sustainable cap. But an interesting thing that they did mention was while they prefer to have lower premiums and higher coverage, and there's still room for improvement in some areas. They're grateful overall again for the program being funded for this year. So that was kind of the general basis of their reaction and comments.
Kevin, does that surprise you that they kind of kept things neutral?
Well, usually if you're a government making an announcement and you invite a couple of players to the news conference to give comments, it isn't that you're going to invite somebody that's going to give you a whole lot of criticism. By the same token, and I think the APAS and SARM comments were both in line. I actually agree with them, but it is also true that the program isn't moving ahead with any enhancements this year, and usually there's some change other than the already announced change to satellite-based forage insurance. Usually there's something to point to as an improvement or modification or extra crop or extra wrinkle, and this was the first time in many years that really it was very much status quo.
We also heard this week FCC released the results of their Drive Away Hunger campaign. Now, Ryan, you followed up on that.
Yeah, it's a good story overall. There's a bunch of different organizations and food companies and pretty much everybody associated with the supply chain, processors, retailers, etc., that contribute to this annual program with Farm Credit Canada. In 2025, all the partners donated a combined 635 million meals to food banks and food security initiatives across Canada. Farm Credit Canada says that equates to about 63 meals per person in a year, so that's quite a bit, as well as being valued at $2.25 billion, so that's also quite a bit. So it's really good to see that everybody is contributing to a good cause. We know that food security is still an issue here in Canada. In fact, there was some numbers from Food Banks Canada that said last year that there was a rise in the use of food banks, 5.2% to be exact overall. And there's about 10 million Canadians that may not be or will be in households rather that be in situations where they don't have enough food, including 1 in 3 children. So while this is good and that there's a positive step in the right direction, there's still a lot of work to do to try to make sure that everybody has plenty of food to eat.
And Kevin, what do you think of that? That sounds like it's been another good year for FCC. It's something that promotes them quite well.
It is. It's a great initiative. I guess I do have some thoughts on it, and one is that food inflation continues to outpace general inflation by a large margin in Canada, and in fact, more food inflation here than in most of the G7 nations, if not all of the G7 nations. And we can debate some of the things that may be structural that may cause that. I also, I guess, have and I don't want to diminish the concerns of people that can't afford a proper diet and who use food banks, but by the same token, it's a system whereby food is available at low or no cost if you can reach a food bank, and we've reduced much of the stigma about using a food bank. So I don't think it's surprising that food bank use will continue to increase. It's just a matter of supply and demand. So I don't know how you stem that problem. I don't know how you go about making sure that the people that are using food banks actually need food banks and aren't utilizing money in inappropriate ways and then running to the food bank. So I know those are not necessarily popular views, but that's how I see the economics of the situation.
Some other news came down this week as well. The Viterra and the Canadian Food Grains Bank had a long-running relationship, but now that Bunge has bought out Viterra, they're ending that relationship. Ryan, you had some news on that front, I believe.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to see in a way. Didn't really have that in my list of expected things to kind of cover list, but nonetheless, it was kind of interesting to learn that, Bunge doesn't really support, uh, faith-based initiatives or a multi-denominational organization like the Canadian Food Grains Bank. So that's primarily the reason why that they're ending the partnership with the CFB, and it's kind of disappointing, really, because again, tying back to the what we just talked about moments ago, food security is a major issue, not only in Canada, but also in many other different parts of the world. And the Canadian Food Grains Bank does a lot of work across Canada and donating funds or grains or other resources to tackle those issues. So to kind of see that happen is kind of disappointing in a way, and especially for farmers that contribute to this initiative as well. Going back to the Viterra days, a lot of times they're close to a Viterra terminal, so it was very easy to contribute. And from a business standpoint, they understood what the program was all about. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets filled, that gap. We'll see what happens in the future.
Kevin, what was your reaction to that news?
Yeah, certainly something I never saw coming. Didn't realize that Bunge had a policy that they didn't donate to faith-based organizations. And it never really occurred to me necessarily that a Canadian Food Grains Bank was a faith-based organization. I guess I should have realized that, but it's not like they're really hardcore religious zealots of any necessary denomination. So it is surprising. Hopefully there will be other sponsors that can step up and fill the role that Viterra used to fill.
Also this week, we learned that Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe would be joining Prime Minister Mark Carney on a trip to India to try to improve trade relations. And Ryan, you had a chance to listen in on that news conference in Regina.
Yeah, that's right. And he was also in Saskatoon this week to kind of talk about the same thing. And I remember one of the questions asked of the premier is, you're going on a trade mission with the prime minister again. Do you have any, kind of reason or belief as to why you've been picked to go on a trade mission again? And Mo kind of pointed to the trade offices that are scattered all around the world, whether that's in India or the UK, UAE, etc. There's a lot of value that has been generated from the trade offices and really put Saskatchewan kind of on the global focus, shall we say, for the lack of a better phrase. So that's one reason. And we know the last time that the two went together, it was to China late last year, and it resulted in the tariffs on canola, different canola products and other agri-food products going down. That's actually coming up just around the corner here in a few days on Sundays. So hopefully China follows through on that commitment. But nonetheless, that was the last time that the two got together. And from what I've read this week, it's expected that the prime minister is going to sign a bunch of trade-related deals with India, and that'll be good news considering that the trade talks have been kind of on again, off again over the last 15 years or so. So that'll be hopefully a positive step in the right direction, not only for Canada, but also Saskatchewan as well, because we are export heavy.
Kevin, do you have any expectations coming out of this trip to India?
Well, based on the China trip, the Prime Minister may not have been going unless there is something fairly substantive to sign and something to announce. At least that was the experience with the China trip. I think it's great to see when agriculture is such an important part of trade with India that Premier Scott Moe can attend and go along and be part of that delegation. I think it speaks to good federal-provincial cooperation, which Canada has sorely lacked through the past many years. So as far as expectations, it's a little bit different than China. China's tariffs against Canada were specifically against Canada in retaliation for tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. In the case of India, they're not necessarily singling out Canada. It's a balancing act between trying to figure out how to keep prices high enough for their farmers while not making their consumers revolt at prices that are too high. So they're always in a very tight balancing act as far as their tariff dance and tariffs up and down. So maybe Canada can get a good deal or a better deal than some other suppliers, perhaps, but China's India's tariff policy was not necessarily aimed solely at Canada like China's tariff policy was.
Another story that came out this week was a news release from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, and they said that they were pleased to hear that the federal, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba governments are investing a combined $262.5 million into Arctic Gateway Group's Port of Churchill and the Hudson Bay Railway Network. SARM President Bill Huber was pretty optimistic about that announcement, but I know, Kevin, in the past you've been a little skeptical of Churchill.
There's been a lot of money and a lot of studies and a lot of talk about Churchill over a lot of years. $262 million sounds like a lot of money, but a lot of money will be needed to make that port viable, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I still have some reservations about how significant it can actually become as far as grain exports, but I'm hoping to be proven wrong.
All right. And then, of course, another announcement came out just on Thursday here in Yorkton that the Saskatchewan government is providing $600,000 to complete construction of the Yorkton Brick Flour Mill Interpretive Center. Kevin, you were in Yorkton back in October to speak at a fundraising event, and how do you feel about hearing that the $600,000 is going to put them over the top for the Interpretive Center?
Well, I know they didn't complain about it at the meeting, but in private conversations, they were concerned that they thought that the province should be contributing a bit on top of contributions they'd received from many other sources. And in addition to being a museum for the brick mill and how it used to operate for basically a century, the Interpretive Center for Agriculture is something that's good for all of agriculture. It's meeting space. I think it's a great initiative, has great community support, and it's really important that the Saskatchewan government is now part of that with this $600,000 contribution. So I'm sure the folks involved with the Yorkton Brick Mill and probably the entire community and that region is happy with this news.
And also on Friday, Kevin, you provided us with some information on the Statistics Canada Farm Cash Receipts Report.
Yeah, and a blizzard of numbers and try to go through and try to make sense of them. But the gist of it is that, yes, farm cash receipts, the total amount received by farmers for payments for all sorts of commodities as well as direct government payments, is up in 2025. But interesting to see that crops and livestock are going different directions, and crop receipts dipping down, livestock receipts going up quite dramatically, and this has been happening for quite a few years, largely based on the strength in the cattle market. And also interesting to see what's happening with government support payments. After the very large widespread drought in 2021, direct payments to farmers out of crop insurance were very high, and in more subsequent years, crops have been better, claims have been lessened, and direct payments have tapered off out of crop insurance. But some other payments have gone up, and a lot of people have complained about agri-stability not being a very effective program, but it has paid out more and more money over the past 3 years, going from about $300 million to $600 million to $900 million in payouts to enrolled producers in 2025. So take what you will from the statistics, and there's always different ways to cut and look at statistics, but those were my main takeaways going through the numbers.
And of course, with it being Friday, the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association annual meeting is on today near Saskatoon. Ryan, you did some research on that.
That's right. It's being held, well, as we speak, as of this recording, just getting underway south of Saskatoon there. One of the interesting things that's on the agenda for the semi-annual meeting is a couple of presentations, one from the Global Institute for Food Security, related to beef cattle and the life cycle analysis. Dr. Stephen Webb is speaking on that. And then the other is from someone that Kevin interviewed recently from SDC Farms, the Chief Commercialization Officer, speaking about the meat processing facility that's being built near Purdue, west of Saskatoon. I know the president of the stock growers, Jeff Yorga, is very interested to hear what she has to say about that. In terms of who they're marketing to and, how this could benefit cattle producers and how they can get involved. So he's definitely looking forward to that. And then finally, resolutions, obviously, kind of forming the basis on what the stock growers will be advocating for on behalf of members over the course of 6 to 12 months. And in terms of what he was asked and expectations, he figures that there might be some strongly worded resolutions regarding the Canadian Food Inspection Agency's proposed changes to traceability rules. So might see a few of those and a few more resolutions on issues that may have previously flown under the radar, but might get some attention at this meeting. So a little bit of everything on the cattle side.
Kevin, it sounds like a pretty interesting meeting all around.
Yeah, and I'll be really interested in more details on the federally inspected multi-species livestock processing facility being constructed at Purdue, and I did have the chance to scratch the surface of that with Ednali Furtuk Zahavi, the Chief Commercialization Officer, in advance of this. But I'm sure we'll have more details as she gives a more complete presentation at the Stock Growers Annual Meeting. But that's exciting news. It's really flown under the radar as that plant has been constructed over these past several years.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch, and 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, saying so long until next time.